Never mind.
We got no TVs. Oh, we got over there. Okay, great. All right, good evening. It is Wednesday, October 9th at 6 p.m. We are on the Keizer Civic Center. I'd like to call to order the Keizer Planning Commission. Commissioners, just remind you, please make sure you turn on your mics before you speak. Otherwise, the guy in the back will come out and we don't talk about the guy behind the curtain. We get to do something cool tonight, but before we do, I just want to take a quick second and acknowledge and appreciate the work by former commissioners Mo Avisham and Ron Burson. Neither one of them chose to re-up for the Planning Commission, and I just want to take a minute and say thank you for their time on the Planning Commission and willingness to bring forward some very thoughtful dialogue to the conversation, and in some cases challenge us to sort of think not only outside of the box, but just completely outside of the conversations we were having. I will make a commitment to Commissioner Burson that we will revisit the accessory dwelling or the accessory structures conversation at some point, because I know that's something that's near and dear to his heart. But with that being said, we get to welcome back a former colleague on the Planning Commission for myself, and I think Commissioner Grants, and I think Councilor Duran, you were on when Frank Hostler was on at the time. No, maybe not. Either way, Frank Hostler's back. And then brand new to the Planning Commission is Lindsay King. So we're going to do the formal swearing in with Dawn. She'll take you together or one at a time?
One at a time, please.
Okay. So, Lindsay, would you like to go first, please?
Sure.
All right, and then afterwards, we'll embarrass you by asking you all kinds of fun questions. And I'll take pictures and I'll send them to you.
So, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read your oath of office to you, like a line at a time, and then you'll repeat it. Okay. Okay, can I ask you a question? I, Lindsay King, being first duly sworn,
I, Lindsay King, being first duly sworn,
upon oath say
that
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Oregon,
and the Constitution of the State of Oregon,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of the Planning Commissioner for the City of Keizer,
of the Planning Commissioner for the City of Keizer,
according to the best of my ability
according to the best of my ability,
for my term of office.
for my term of office.
And then I just need a signature.
We're allowed to clap, it's okay. And while Lindsay's wrapping that up, Frank, if you want to head down, please.
Thank you.
Sarah said we only had 30 minutes, so.
No, I said that if he talked less, we'd be done in 30 minutes. Yeah.
Just read a line at a time, and if you'll raise your right hand. I, Frank Hostler, being first duly sworn,
I, Frank Keizer, being first duly sworn,
upon oath say
upon oath say
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Oregon,
and the Constitution of the State of Oregon,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties of a planning commissioner
discharge the duties of the Planning Commission
for the City of Keizer,
for the City of Keizer,
according to the best of my ability
according to the best of my ability,
for my term of office.
for my term of office.
Okay, great, thank you. So I just need your signature a couple times here.
The cool part is when we're all done, Commissioner Hostler gets to go do it then and now on Facebook, from his first swearing in to his new one.
Yes, a couple things have changed.
And then right here are my other documents.
And then once Commissioner Hostler gets settled, I don't know, take 10 seconds and tell us a little bit about your history. Tell us why you're here, why you wanted to come back, and I don't know, what's a fun question?
Favorite ice cream?
Favorite ice cream. So why are you here? Why did you come back? And what's your favorite ice cream?
Okay. This is my first time here, so I'm not coming back. Is my mic on?
As long as the red light's on, you should be good to go.
Red button on? Okay. So I'm here because I'm a land use consultant, and I have a passion for development in my community. I have lived in Keizer for a few years now, and I love just seeing what the community is doing, what, the city is proposing, the new developments that we've seen. But I've also really kind of just being involved and not really being nosy, but just kind of know what's going on. So I want to make sure that I'm giving to my community the best, or, what I can. So that's why I'm here. And my favorite ice cream is mint chocolate chip.
That's a good one.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hostler.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for allowing me back on. I appreciate it. When I was in the service, I was gravely injured, and I had a number of operations, and that's behind me now. And a large part of why I'm motivated for this position is when I went to Madigan Army Medical Center in Fort Lewis, this lieutenant colonel says, "Sergeant Hostler, your spine's gonna heal, but it will heal it correct." So what I'm saying is, Keizer's gonna grow, but how is it gonna grow? And so I would like to be a part of that. In that, I have a number of construction years. I was an engineer in the Army. My family had a construction business. I have attended Portland State in community development, and I just recently graduated, and I'm going back for another degree. And I think it's important that the average citizen gets wrapped around their lives and their families and making money, that they don't look at the big picture, small picture, big picture. And I put a lot of energy in trying to have a conversation with people like Shane and knowing when that person is talking small picture or big picture. And so what that tells me is it tells me I need to be informed. And so I choose to be informed. Oh, ice cream.
It's very serious. That's actually the most serious
Very
question.
serious ice cream, wow. I would have to say, I'm just gonna go with vanilla.
It's the base for all great ice
You
cream
can
opportunities.
put soda
right?
in
You
it,
know.
Keizer root beer, you know, orange root beer, not 7-Up, but yeah, you get where I'm going.
Yeah, that's a very good point. 7-Up and vanilla ice cream, it's kind of like, you know, orange juice after brushing your teeth. It doesn't make sense. Well, I'm glad you're here. Glad you're here. We got some cool stuff on the agenda tonight, but first, action item after swearing in of our new planning commissioners is the election of the chair and vice chair. So I'll open up the floor for nominations.
Nominate Commissioner Lawyer as chair and Commissioner Grenz as vice chair.
Is there any additional nominations for consideration? Are you sure? All right, we'll close nominations and, do we want to, I was, formal motion or is it consensus?
Motion. Motion.
Motion? Okay, well, the nominations were closed and, need a motion to elect, Commissioner Lawyer as chair and Commissioner Grants as vice chair.
Can I move
You
for my own?
You can do whatever you want.
Okay, well, I move to accept the nomination I just made.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? I will say that, you know, this is likely my last year. I term out at the end of 2025. And so if anybody is interested in learning and want to kind of step into this position as sort of pro tem, that's one of the things I read, Shane, pro tem's allowed. I don't know if I can do it while I'm sitting here, but either way, I would encourage you to maybe, you know, reach out, say, hey, I'd really like to try to run a meeting or something. I think it's super important because as it is right now, I am termed out at the end of next year. And so I want to encourage somebody that wants to learn to kind of step in and get a chance to run a meeting. I don't see that there's a reason we can't do that. And if we can't right now, we'll put in the rules that we can do that. Because that's what we're talking about tonight. All those in favor of, any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And I will abstain. Motion passes unanimously with one abstention. Because it feels very selfish to vote for myself. Although I will vote, I guess I can't split the vote. I can't say yes for Jeremy and no for myself. Anyways, moving on. All right, consideration of the August 2024 minutes. Is there any corrections? Or if I can, let's get a motion on the table for approval as submitted.
Move to accept the minutes as submitted.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes as presented by Commissioner Hutchins, a second by Commissioner Witters. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. And do we have abstentions because you both weren't here?
Yes.
Okay, so abstentions from Commissioner Hostler and Commissioner King. Great. Item number 5, appearance of interested citizens. Ladies, have you got anything to talk to us about? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for being here, as always. Public hearing, we have none tonight, which means we are on to the Shane and Dina show to tell us about 2 items tonight, the Planning Commission rules and the climate-friendly area discussion, which will be a continuation from our conversation in August. Razzle dazzle.
Razzle dazzle, okay. Yeah, so the first thing we'll talk about is the rules. We sent you guys a bunch of rules, so that was cool. Planning Commission has rules. If you didn't know that before, as of last week, you now know that. This was actually an item, I told you that Joe was gonna get thrown under the bus, so Joe, when you watch this, bus here, you're under it. So this really came from our legal department, this didn't come from Shane. I don't really follow rules very well, so I'm reminded when I'm supposed to follow them. But this was one that had been on our legal department's list for a time. And with some of the changes we made here not too long ago, where Planning Commission is going to be hearing some additional land use applications, felt like it would be an appropriate time to revisit these rules. Really, we're not asking, like, a couple things, you know, whatever. Frank, you remember me from the last time you were here. Lindsay, you've talked to me on the phone plenty of times. I'm a pretty laid back guy. So we're not really looking for a formal motion so much tonight as kind of consensus from Planning Commission. There's a few things in the rules as we look through them that there is a little bit of inconsistency in a few spots, specifically when we look at how we run hearings at the Planning Commission level versus how council runs hearings. So one of the kind of consensus type thought items is, do we want to align the time allotted to applicants and the rebuttal time and all of that to have that align with the same process that council uses? I mean, I think it's like 15 minutes versus 20 minutes or something like that. And there's a few other things that the legal department had said, hey, there's some things that are just inconsistent, so we think it's a good idea to maybe make these things consistent. So kind of from a one piece perspective on the rules, if it's the consensus of Planning Commission that, yeah, we should probably make these things consistent, just consensus is all I would need to go back and work with the legal department to bring an actual draft of a red line change of, hey, here's how we are gonna fix these few identified items. So that's kind of one piece. And like there was another thing in the rules, like I didn't know this because I don't spend a lot of time reading the rules, but I mean, the rules say we start at 7. And I've worked here for a very long time, and Planning Commission has always started at 6, to my knowledge.
One was
So-
7:30 and then 7.
Yeah, and so like that's one we should probably fix that. That one I would recommend. Yeah, we probably should fix that and maybe make it like accurate to how we're actually functioning. But then the other piece, we really wanted to give Planning Commission the opportunity to look over the rules and say, hey, can we do this? We want to do this. Maybe we want to make changes. And so it really is up to, they're your guys' rules. So, you know, clearly there's, the last part of the packet there is not your rules. There's a council ordinance in there. You don't have the power to change that. If you wanted to see changes to that, you could make a recommendation that we could take to council to change that. But the rules themselves, the Planning Commission rules, those adjustments and changes are yours to kind of govern. So those were the kind of just the few things. So like I said, tonight I really am looking for the consensus on yes, go forth and make them consistent as the legal department sees fit. And, you know, make some of those corrections to things like 6 o'clock. The other thing that was brought up in the rules, I've been reminded of it a few times. I mean, the rules are very specific that we meet once a month. That's both in Planning Commission's rules and City Council's rules. And then there's a process in there for if we counsel a meeting. In my time sitting in the chair and way before my time, that exact process has not always been followed. So that may be something that we would want to reconsider, or maybe you don't, and maybe we need to do a better job of being diligent about properly canceling a meeting. But I know in the last few years, there's been plenty of times where I might get a call from Chair Lawyer, and he might say, hey, do we have a public hearing scheduled? And no. Do we have to meet? And I was like, no, there's really, you know, or sometimes I maybe have called Chair Lawyer. I mean, sometimes that conversation happens, and I think, you know, there's reaching out. I don't think anybody really is super upset if we are not having a meeting just for the sake of having a meeting. But right now, the rules kind of do say something a little bit different than that. So that would be another one that if Planning Commission wants more flexibility in that, that would be something that, again, if it was the consensus of the Planning Commission, I could work with Mr. Lindsay and the legal department to craft some language that might work in some greater flexibility for commissioners. So that's kind of my spiel. Are you razzled? Dazzled?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Bill Murray would be proud. How do you want to do this, Shane? Do you want to do, we want to just throw darts at the board and see what sticks?
Sure.
Okay, so my first thought is on the time. I struggle to want to just like set a max time or set a time because I think that we witnessed in the one as a judicial process we had, the applicants didn't need the full amount of time, and so I don't want them to
Right.
feel compelled to do it. But also, depending on what the terms are, if we end up with a crowd of, I don't know, 20, and we need a lot of time for public comment, I want the flexibility. I think the board or the commission needs the flexibility to say, okay, it says that, opposition or those in favor can get X amount of time. Maybe we want to kind of scale that back. And so maybe it's a not to exceed amount versus just a set time.
Okay.
I think it just affords the latitude, especially when you have some things where, form letters are great to hear once, but 35 times being read sort of becomes a bit difficult.
Okay.
And also, frankly, it's just a waste of, let me rephrase that. It takes time away from other people that are ready to talk, right? So I would say if not to exceed and allow flexibility is certainly what I would might recommend. But again, please don't let me dominate this conversation. I know, Lindsay, you've had a lot of experience with these types of things and stuff, so the rules thing, the meeting, I think my opinion is that it worked well. I think that maybe it's a conversation with the chair and the planning director, because there's been times, frankly, where you're like, I thought I was gonna be ready, but I'm not exactly here, I need another month. And I think to try to call that too early might be premature, and you go, oh, we actually thought we needed it, or there's something that comes up and we cancel a meeting and now all of a sudden you actually don't have a meeting to do. But that doesn't say that we can't schedule a meeting at any given time, right? But that does present the chair with, I don't know, I don't know if there's a second check. I don't know.
Sure.
I don't want to create a serial meeting or action outside of the meeting, but.
Right, that can be somewhat of the concern. I think for tonight's purpose, if what I'm hearing from a consensus level is, yeah, we would maybe like to move away from that like hard and fast, what's in there right now, and give ourselves some more flexibility. I think what would be great is I can kind of vet that with our legal department to see what options are there, and maybe we present you guys with a couple of options that we come up with. Does that work for everybody? I'm seeing mostly head nods. Yeah. Okay. I think that's good enough as far as, because that's kind of what I anticipated, since by practice we've done it a little differently, and nobody's ever been like, oh, I'm so mad that this got changed and I didn't know and whatever. So I think that's fine, and we can talk to Joe, because there is some concern with, serial meetings and that kind of stuff.
To avoid that, it might be just to check in with the council liaison. So it's like,
Okay.
the chair and the planning director talk, and then the council liaison says, okay, not a problem. So I think you have 3 points of contact, and I think that sets a level. And I know Councilor Duran would really like to know well in advance of a meeting, so he's not being told the night before that we don't have something going on. Yeah.
Okay.
The only other thing, one of the things that I'm curious about, Shane, and I'd like you to come back, if you would, with consensus of the planning commission, is what's the history behind the term limits? Because I couldn't find it. I went back through the ordinances. I feel like it's an Uncle Nate thing, but I don't know.
I don't know either. Actually, that was something that Dina and I talked about, because, well, actually you came up and we were both like, but then you said, oh, I'm terming out this year. Because we were like, I don't know that I knew that it was just the term limits as outlined. So I don't know if there's something in statute for that or not. I don't believe that there is, but if that's something that Planning Commission wants to consider, I mean, I'm, like I said, these are your guys' rules, and I think that's 100% fair. Obviously, with any of these things, even with the terms and the re-upping, we still have our process with the volunteer coordinating committee and all of those kinds of things. I do know there's been historically, I've been around long enough that we have had times where folks have served out their full terms and we lose a really seasoned, educated planning commissioner who is like enjoying the work and wants to be around. And like as a staff person, that's a bummer because, you know, even tonight, we're coming back to you all with something that we talked about a couple months ago that for two of you commissioners, well, hopefully you're able to do some homework ahead of time. If not, I'll try to describe as much as I can. But like it is, you know, for continuity, I see that as being 100% valid. If that's something you guys are interested in extending or changing, like I said, I would want to check with my legal department to see if there's anything, but I'm not aware of, it may have just been one of those, yeah, this is what it is.
I think
So,
Marion County's planning chair has been there for like 20 years.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of places are that way, so.
And I don't necessarily, I think there's wisdom in maybe allowing more opportunity. But I think also just leaving it open-ended might pose a risk, right? Because then you get something that just won't go away. And that's not a bad thing. It's also maybe not a good thing. I don't know. It depends on how much, you know, I keep talking tonight. Sarah's already bumped me in.
That's right, that's right.
But it just might be worth exploring. And maybe
Yeah.
it's three-year or whatever. I don't
Sure.
know. But I'd like to understand the history because I think we've got some very, very talented people on the dais right now. Myself not included in that company. And I think that there's a lot that's going to be going on in the next probably 3 to 4 years, where tenure is going to be super important.
Sure.
We have people that are, because, I mean, I think Councilor Duran's the only one here now that remembers the River Overlay District outside of you all. And that wasn't that long ago.
No, it was
So,
18.
anyways, those are the few that stuck out. Commissioner Lopez.
No, I agree. I definitely agree, especially when we're planning for long term here. I mean, it's super crucial, so. And some of us, speaking for myself, eventually, you know, we want to make our way and want to, you know, step up to those roles that you guys have. But it's important to also, for me, to put my time in here so I can be prepared for that. And if we're looking at a term, then it kind of, oh, you're already limited to, if you don't do it now, then you're done, right? So I agree with what you say.
Is there any other things that you saw in the rules that you think, I'm just gonna start picking on people because I don't want to dominate the conversation. If you don't have anything, we can always come back, but.
Yeah, come back.
Commissioner King.
I also agree with you, having come from working with Marion County and their planning commission, like you said, some of them have been there for 10, 12 years. I mean, it's a long time and they have a vast array of knowledge. And, you know, some things come up often, other things it's like, oh, we haven't talked about that in 5 or 6 years. Does anybody remember it? Not really, especially if you're, you know, everybody's new. So I do agree that there should be some aspect of longevity for, you know, for commission members. And whether it's a, you know, a limited term of however many years, or if it's does the commission agree that we should extend it another term, like a voting kind of thing, or is there public comment received, anything like that? I think that it's all kind of open there, but I do think that having that longevity is extremely important.
Is there any other things in the rules you see that you're ready to talk about?
I did read in the 83 resolution, I know way back when, it, you know, it says that it talked about, you know, the chairman and appointing serve for 1 year ending at the adjournment of the regular October meeting or until his successor is elected. Maybe that's something that we can explore as far as our terms, if there is anybody that, somebody, I don't know how to say it. I have it in my head, but, you know, basically it's like, who do we want more, or who does the public want as far as if there's some opposition or competition for the position?
For chair or vice chair?
Or just a commission member.
Okay.
In general, just kind of taking some of this older language out here, and, because I'm not sure where it came from. I've never read anything in any of the codes that I've seen that says it's this way because of of that. And like, you know, the director said, maybe it's in state statute. I've never seen anything though.
For the, are you talking about the term of the overall position on
Yeah.
the planning commission?
Yeah.
Okay. Not necessarily chair or vice chair.
Not necessarily chair, but
Because I think that correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, I think that we just do that every October, just as a matter of course. That way individuals have the opportunity, if they wish, to step into that role.
Yeah, I think there is a rule that speaks to the officers. In 83-1, it does kind of talk at the regular meeting in October, you elect the officers. But as far as the
Yeah.
actual term limit of a planning commissioner, I don't know where historically that came from. It may have just been, hey, this is what we're doing because this makes sense. But yeah, so is that what, Commissioner King, is that what you're saying, is like instead of extending it to like, oh, it's a 5-year term or whatever? Is that what we're talking about?
kind of, I'm just kind of throwing, more or less throwing ideas out there of, you know,
Okay.
maybe this one specific cookie cutter doesn't fit, but we can kind of get something together with everything that we have here in this stack of ordinances.
It's a little bit of hodgepodge.
It is.
Let's go to Commissioner Witters. Anything outside of just the chair or vice chair term things? Is there anything in here that you feel compelled or want to talk about or ready to raise up?
I did have one question, and maybe this is the lack of lawyer in me, and maybe this might be something that Mr. Lindsay can address.
Let's blame it on Joe. Let's do it.
All right, but under the 2023 ordinance on page 25, I saw this somewhere else also, but it talks about under that section B, it's 2 sentences. It says, no more than 2 voting members will be engaged principally in the buying, selling, or developing of real estate for profit as individuals or as members of any partnership, yada, yada. And then it goes on to say, no more than 1 voting member shall be engaged in the same kind of occupation, business, trade, or profession. To me, those kind of counter each other. If you have 2 people that are engaged in the buying, selling, whatever, then you have the potential right there of having more than 1 person in the same occupation. And maybe I'm misunderstanding what it's trying to do at that point, but they seem to be in conflict with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I do believe, I think what they're saying there is that you're not gonna have 2 real estate professionals on your planning commission or whatever. But if you had a real estate professional and a home builder, that would be a possibility because they're 2 different professions. But if you have both of those 2, you can't have another real estate or building or developer.
It's just that second sentence seems vague enough to me that
Yeah.
when it says in the same kind of occupation, business, it's not the same occupation or the same business. It almost just seems a little messy right there.
Sure.
That's just, it kind of jumped out at me when I was reading through that, so.
It's funny, I read the same thing, so I think it would be worth getting an interpretation from Joe on. And this piece was done under an emergency, I think it was last year, or maybe a couple years ago. I think at the time, because we had a commissioner that also served on the budget committee, you're not allowed, because I think those are they're 2 required positions under the state constitution or state statute or whatever. And so you can't actually serve on 2 that are required. And so I think that they had to do this to codify that issue. But yeah, I think that's worth getting a.
I think I understand what the intent of it was, but I think it's messy enough that it could, really trip things up.
Well, because with you doing your job and then with Fernando doing stuff that deals with home repairs and things like that, and then with Lindsay being, a planner, and then Jeremy being a developer.
That was my question. Is anyone actually tracking this?
Dawn is.
Okay.
She can tell you everybody's job. I don't know if that's true or not, but.
It's part of the process of going through the volunteer coordinating committee. Yeah, it's supposed to be being vetted through those channels.
And I think that really boils down to like an actual statutory conflict of interest issue more than it does like the actual membership more than anything.
Yeah.
'Cause I think the fear is collusion, right? but
Yeah, and it's also like born in the desire to have a broad range of interests
Right.
on city committees, especially on a planning commission. If you have a planning commission that's full of just developers, they're gonna have a certain take, I think, probably, on what codes should be changed and how they should be changed. But so, yeah, I think definitely we can get some clarification from Mr. Lindsay on that. It may be that that's lifted right out of some state language.
Right.
I don't know for sure. Again, I told you I was gonna throw him under the bus, so as many times as we can do it, like, it's gonna be awesome. So,
well, I think I would maybe add it with Commissioner Witters' blessing. I think if Mr. Lindsay finds the language to be ambiguous or unclear, if he has a suggested recommended language to fix that, I hope it doesn't put anybody at jeopardy sitting on the dais, but certainly, we'll just put after today's date.
right, and to be clear, so that is one of those pieces that's an ordinance that was passed by council, so it wasn't a planning, but I think that's one that, you know, clearly we can get the clarification from Mr. Lindsay, and if there's recommendations from the commission on how we want to maybe wordsmith that language, then we can send that to them for their consideration, so,
July 23, Shannon was still here. We'll blame Shannon.
yeah, sure.
Cool.
Let's do it. No, but you're 100% right. It was the budget committee issue that the ordinance had to be passed.
Was he still here in 23?
No, it was in 2020 was the first one, then we changed it. to
This was
budget
the
committee.
revised one.
No.
Or this one was the revised one.
It's in
It was
the other
adopted
one,
in
too.
23. 23-867 on page 25. Down the bottom.
That's also in this one.
That's strange.
It's in there twice.
Yeah, they probably just amended one section. I think section 1B is what they amended here on page 25. Honestly, it'd be really, like, not to be a stickler, but if we can, like, do a set of rules instead of, like, having 6 or 7 different things that guide the direction of the planning commission, that'd be super, right?
I agree.
Because, I mean, I think Commissioner Hutchins just pointed out, like, you have the same language in 2 areas, and I think that could potentially be confusing.
Yeah.
I was already confused.
But we have a youth
Any
liaison
other-
in the second one.
I'm sorry?
We have a youth liaison in the second one and not in
Right,
the first one,
right.
so.
Any other ideas? And again, we'll come back. I don't want anybody, Commissioner Witters? No. Commissioner Osler?
Yes, I do. Page 13, Rule 9. Robert's Rules of Order. When the first time I came on the commission, from Amazon, I got the Robert's Rules of Orders book. And so what this does, to me, what this does is opens that door for that book to be implemented in this policy for somebody else who has taken note and doesn't agree. And so they want to push forward that in Robert's Rules of Order.
Unpack that a little bit, if you would, please.
Their agenda, developer, okay, in how we unfold or how we hold our meeting with that developer, and that developer doesn't like in the manner in which we conduct business, they're gonna cherry pick, or they're gonna fine needle Robert's Rules of Order and saying that you were out of line at this part.
Well, but Shane, correct me if I'm wrong. Robert's Rules of Order is a guideline on how to conduct a meeting. It doesn't hold any legal, as long as you guys meet all the statutory requirements for notification, all that stuff and all the law stuff as relates to land use. You're not going to necessarily get completely hung up on a procedural thing unless it's just a bad vote, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's accurate. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, remember that, I mean, I can't give legal advice to the commission. But yeah, I think that, you know, realistically, I mean, I think what Rule 9's getting at is that, hey, if there's an unclarity on how to conduct certain things, then you fall back to kind of Robert's Rules of Orders, which kind of gives guidance for how you conduct public meetings. But I would agree, I don't think it's gonna hamstring the planning commission as long as you're operating within the established rules. Like if we're talking about an actual development proposal that's being, you know, quasi-judicial land use decision or whatever, we have it that's codified in the development code of how that is supposed to run and what the decision criteria is that we're
Right.
looking at and all of that. So I think I think you're correct.
So for example, if we choose to say something along friendly amendment versus an amended motion, that's not gonna toss a legislative action.
It shouldn't, in my opinion, and I don't think that it would. Again, Joe, you're under the bus, because he would be able to answer this with a certain level of authority that I don't have the ability to answer it with. The other thing to remember is, unlike tonight's meeting where Joe did not show up, no, he didn't. He had an obligation, so he was excused. But unlike a meeting like tonight where our city attorney is not here, if we're having a public hearing and if we're having a land use decision in front of the commission, the city attorney will be here. So, the city attorney's role really is to make sure that from a meeting run perspective, I'm not a decision maker. You all are being kept in line and following the rules and the procedures accordingly. And if, I'm glad Dawn was here, because I would have been like, yeah, do it by consensus. I don't care if we get an actual motion for it. Does it matter? There was no other, conflicting ones, but like those are the kinds of things that, that's why the city attorney is normally at these, just in order to make sure if there's any parliamentary procedure things that need to be followed or adjusted, he's able to catch those and go, actually, you need to withdraw that motion, or, no, you need to table that, or you need to set it over for a certain date or whatever. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
What else you got? I know you did your homework on it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I cheated and I watched YouTube from last month's meeting. There are a number of things that I have a fairly good knowledge of, but there are a number of things I do not. And so, what I mean is this, like you said, let's unpack this thing. I don't think we can go over this in one evening. And so my question is, are we gonna pace ourselves? Are we gonna meet benchmarks, or?
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Are you?
No.
Okay. I kind of just jumped right in there. So really, as I said at the beginning, my goal for tonight's meeting for these rules that were coming, especially when I found out late that Attorney Lindsay wasn't going to be able to be here to kind of talk and give us a little more guidance, I said, okay, well, here's what we'll do. We'll talk about them generally. I'm going to try to get some concurrence from Planning Commission on, yes, let's work towards, consistency within the rules. I think that gives some marching orders to staff to work with the legal department. Ultimately, changes to these rules are going to come back before the commission for consideration, right? And so there is time. And there's nothing about these rules. This was, for those of you who know, we have a legal assistant who's been around forever. Ms. Harms is awesome. And she keeps me in line a lot. And she's got a list. And we kind of will joke about the Tammy list. This has been something on her list for a while. I mean, clearly, the rules were 1983 originally, right? And they've been amended a couple times, but really, there's not been a big rewrite here. So we're not in a mad dash or a rush to get everything right or perfect right off the bat. Yeah. I think getting some consensus from commission that yes, flip side is commission could say, nah, the rules are all fine, we don't need to do anything. And that's fine. If that's the decision y'all want to make, then I'm like, all right, we had them look at it, they didn't care, we're good. But I think that ultimately what I would say is that if you're looking at different things and you have questions or suggestions, you even could send those to me. Again, we want to avoid serial meetings and not necessarily having it being sent to everybody. But as staff, we're going to bring back proposed changes. And so if there's things that come up and there's concerns or oh, what about this or what about that? You could absolutely reach out to myself or to Dina, and we can take that into consideration as we work with the legal department to draft some language. And then when we come back to Planning Commission in the public meeting, then we can talk about those if there's additional changes that y'all want to see. Does that make sense?
Well, yes.
Okay.
He said, "Hua." He was an Army guy.
Yeah.
You're going, "Hua." I love it. That's what's up. All right, Commissioner Hutchins.
Most everything I've got is out already. My only question is, what is a sanction when they sanction us? What does that look like? Because we're volunteers.
So is the city council, and basically, I think it's just basically a written warning, right?
Okay.
And generally it would happen,
Curious.
I mean, I don't know that.
Hopefully
Planning
we can
Commission
get,
gets
I mean,
executive
hopefully we can get
session.
scarlet letters or something. I mean, I don't know. We could, something would be awesome.
It's a demerit.
A sash you have to wear for the next meeting.
How does this work?
Actually, I really want to see the official dunce cap for the planning commission, and I volunteer to wear it all the time, because I guarantee you I earn it every single meeting.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
All right, so here's what I heard, and I'm gonna summarize, and then you all tell me if I'm nuts or if we're moving in the right direction. One concept is to try to take all of this and turn it into a set of rules, so consolidate everything into one set of rules. We're going to look at creating not to exceed timeframes that are consistent with the city council hearing processes, but allow the flexibility for the commission to set different times within. I think there might be some struggle with that, but I think we'll have to notice it potentially that certain way. I don't know how that works.
Yeah, and there may be some actual statutory requirements on that too, because, you know, with the hearings officer, these timeframes are pretty similar to what we do at other hearings. But we can look at that for sure. I mean, I think that from what I'm hearing and from the head nods, I absolutely hear the marching order of let's figure out if we can build in some flexibility for us. And so I think we can tackle
I think the
that.
not to exceed makes sense.
Yep.
Right? I think you set a ceiling on it, but I think I've witnessed throughout my career in the quasi-judicial space, there is opportunity to also set, you know, a floor saying this is what you get. So we talked about exploring what potentially looks like to change the term limits and what makes sense. But also I think the history there is really important. One of the things that Dr. Jerry McGee told me a long time ago was it's okay to make changes, but always understand how you got there. And so I think that's super important. If there's wisdom, I guarantee there's wisdom on how that was created, but I think it'd be really important to kind of make sure that we understand that. Commissioner Witters brought up the issue of the page 25, and I think Commissioner Hutchins brought it up on the previous 2020 ordinance where it talked about no more than 2 voting members, et cetera. So we're going to explore that, understand what that is, get some additional clarification on it, and ask Mr. Lindsay to change the language as appropriate to make it less icky.
I
And
like
then,
a technical term.
what's that? Yeah, I mean, we're razzle-dazzle icky tonight, what else? And then I feel like Commissioner Hostler, we talked about Robert's rules, and then maybe just understanding and maybe making sure that there's no unintended consequences of what exists in that space. And then I think Commissioner King brought up the issue as it relates to, I guess the question, and maybe I'm gonna expand on your thought a little bit and maybe translating it in my own head. In bodies like the Energy Facility Siting Council, if a counselor in that body does not get a successor, they remain in place until a successor is defined. And I think, now that I'm thinking about what I heard Commissioner King saying, maybe that's kind of what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yay, I win. So in theory, I mean, it would be, you know, if there's no successor found, then the VCC can, you know what I'm talking
Right,
about?
yep,
Remain in place.
yep.
What else? What did I miss?
The canceling of meetings.
Yeah, well, yeah, that was a given.
Okay,
Sorry.
just making sure, I'm just making my notes.
Is anybody opposed to not having meetings and allowing the chair and a confirmation from the council liaison? I think that's a really good recommendation, but anybody opposed to the idea? What else? What are we missing? Dina, what do you think we need to change?
You guys covered it all.
Great. I don't get to pick on Dina very often.
We all thought about the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, it was one of those, I kind of chuckled because I'm like, I don't know that I've ever read these rules. So, I mean, I'm not a planning commissioner, but I do go to planning commission meetings all the time. So yeah, I think that's great. And I appreciate you all looking at them and giving that input. I would anticipate, I don't know, I'll have to talk to the legal department about time frame for when we're going to want to bring these back to you guys for some, you know, some actual proposed language changes. But I do feel that, you know, I saw a lot of head nods. And I think that gives me what I need to go back to them and come back with an actual proposed, hey, here's a cleaned up set of rules that make sense for us.
And I'm the worst at this, and if something comes up, as you look through these and you have an aha moment, reach out to Shane or Dina
Yes.
or, Joe.
Yeah, and obviously.
And just say, hey, I was looking at this and I really think it's important that we look at it and consider it, because, you know, that matters. Your opinion on
Yeah.
this matters. It is gonna be our governing document moving forward, assuming council likes it and wants to take it on, but, yeah.
Okay.
Any last thoughts? Yes, Councilor Duran. What is your thoughts on this, Councilor Duran?
You forgot
I didn't
to
even
talk
ask
to
you.
me.
What did your?
Well, I think you should add into the term limits that after you term out, then you run for election so you can come back as a liaison.
That you can or cannot?
That you can.
You have to.
That you have to.
Oh,
That
so
you-
mandatory.
Mandatory, yeah.
But if you don't term out,
Yeah.
I was really bummed when I lost you on this planning commission. We had a lot of fun. I'm thankful you're still with us. I got to have him last night at Parks too. I mean, I think he was over me by the end of the night. That's okay. Sarah is too. Great. Let's talk about CFAs.
Yes. It's our favorite subject. Okay, so.
And for those uninitiated, climate-friendly areas.
Climate-friendly
my
areas.
apologies.
Or we like to we like to call them walkable mixed-use areas. That's kind of what we decided to call them, but that's not the technical term. So in the August meeting, and I know most of you were there, the two new commissioners, you guys weren't there, but it was a great meeting that we had, a great presentation from the Council of Government staff that's assisting us in making some changes. So with the designation of our climate-friendly areas, you know, we've done a study and we looked at those 3 sub-districts in the River Cherry Overlay District, the Lock Haven District, the Shamawa District, and the Cherry Center. So the centers were kind of the areas we were focused in on that we thought made the most sense for our climate-friendly areas, because frankly, a lot of the work that we did back in 2018 when we created the River Cherry Overlay District and did the Keizer Revitalization Plan, they were already kind of moving in that direction that now we're mandated to move faster in. And at that meeting, Planning Commission was concerned about the possibilities of displacement in the Cherry Center, our most south district, which had the most capacity, which, you know, valid. It also had, from a demographics perspective, the lower income levels that were a little bit more susceptible to the possibilities of displacement with redevelopment. And so at that meeting, the commission kind of collectively, as from a consensus base, said, what would it take to just go all in on that Lock Haven Center? So what's in your packet tonight, you know, we went back to the drawing board a little bit, and Council of Governments crunched some numbers. We had a couple meetings. I chatted with the state. And so the result is that little, it's like about a 3-page memo, or 4 pages with 5 pages. I can't count. Whatever, it's 5 pages long, but like 2 of those pages are just some maps. But so it kind of spells out by the numbers what it would take to just be the Lock Haven Center, or kind of what our options were there if we said, okay, Cherry Center, that's off the table. We're not going to make a bunch of changes and deal with the equity analysis piece there and deal with the possibilities of promoting, you know, displacement. So we looked at the Lock Haven Center, and it's possible, as the chart kind of shows, but what it would require is those properties that are zoned medium density residential, they would, what's that? Oh, sorry, it's 36. Yeah, 36 of the packet. Sorry, I had to put my glasses on to read that little number. Or, Matt, if you could have held up your paper, I probably could have read it just fine. So, but yeah, so in that, there's kind of the math there, the chart, and so there's a couple little arrows that says this meets the target, or this meets the target, or at the bottom, this meets the target, which we already kind of knew that if we increased the allowed height in Cherry, it could meet the target all by itself. We said, yeah, let's look at some other options. So in order for Lock Haven, the sub-district Lock Haven, to meet it all by itself and not designate more than just that one CFA, basically what that would look like is having to increase the height allowance in not only the mixed-use zone, but also in the RM zone. And it's not quite as simple as just changing the height allowance, because the rules around CFAs would also require certain types of uses that are allowed in every CFA, which when we looked at it previously, we said, hey, look at that. The uses are exactly like the uses we already allow in the mixed use zone. Perfect, we're already doing it. We don't allow those in the RM zone currently. And so it would, there's a large RM zoned property on the corner of Lock Haven and River Road. It's the manufactured home park that's there. And then there's another one that is the vacant field, which is the Earl piece of property. Both of these pieces of properties were identified in the revitalization plan as being a possibility of upzoning. But when we went through the study for the revitalization plan in 2018, and I kind of put this in the staff report, but I'll just kind of verbally tell you the history a little bit. One of the concerns there was, we went through and we rezoned all of River Road. We changed it from commercial office and some commercial mixed stuff and some commercial general, and we just said everything's mixed use now. We're gonna kind of take the sideboards off, make it more flexible, give more opportunity to property owners. And not take away anything, but give more opportunity. Those properties were talked about, and I fully would expect that at the point when the Earl family determines they're gonna come in and develop that and do something, there's probably a high probability they'll approach us and say, hey, I think we wanna do a zone change. And we'll say, yes, we support that. That's in our comp plan that we should do that. The manufactured home park, there was some talk about, do we just legislatively change these and make these mixed use also? Because they're a couple of bigger pieces and it might actually catalyze some development. But huge concern there is with zone changing a manufactured home park, while it's not actually considered affordable housing, it is what we kind of in the planner world would call naturally occurring affordable housing, because it does represent a housing product for a income bracket that isn't the same as detached single-family home ownership. And so the concern there with doing a legislative rezone at the time was that has a high, well, I don't know about probability, but it definitely has the potential to incentivize the redevelopment of that space and basically remove all those folks that are living there and move them off somewhere else. Yes, sir?
The landowner
Yeah.
at that corner, the southwest corner there,
Yep.
hasn't actually come in and said, hey, what can I do with this property, right?
No.
Okay, thank you.
No, and ultimately, if a property owner there came to us and said, hey, we're looking to redevelop our site and we want to do a comp plan zone change to make this thing mixed use, it would be right in line with the Keizer revitalization plan. The difference there is, again, is that something the city's doing, or is that something a private property owner's doing to realize what they want to do with their property? And so at the time in 2018, when we were adopting the revitalization plan in the River Cherry Overlay District, the Planning Commission at the time, the council at that time was very concerned about being the policymakers that said, oh, we're gonna change this, and then possibly pushing that forward in a direction that, could be detrimental to some of our community members. So that being, the reason I say that is that I know the commission had some concerns because of, the equity analysis piece for the Cherry Center. And as we talked there, there is the potential for some displacement, but based on the actual zoning and the built environment, it's probably not a huge potential, but there is potential. And that was a concern of the commission. I think, here is an example where while it doesn't technically meet the same thing based on the census bracketing for the demographics, as far as it being, I guess, what was the word? Vulnerable. That was the word that was for the southeast area. It was vulnerable. This doesn't have that same vulnerability from a demographics or an income bracket, but from a practical, you have a development that's right there that, it would be more practical.
This one's not captured properly in the vulnerability area. I think that when you look at the census tracts and how those.
Oh, yeah, they're big. They're
huge, and
that's
this is never
a
gonna get
big,
captured,
right.
because it's gonna pull in from, anything on the.
Well, and it's, I
along
mean, I
Shamawa,
think it's
yeah.
probably an overall that it may include like McNairy Estates and stuff in that same
If
census
not
tract.
inland
So,
shores at a minimum, so
yeah, that's
it's,
true.
it's not gonna capture in a
Yeah,
census
so I mean,
tract,
so it's
but-
obviously a big aggregate, whereas in Southeast, it's the
Right.
same kind of issue where it comes up right to like, Cherry there, and it's moving out to the east and the south, so it
Right.
may not be right in that area, but it is in the surrounding area. So all that to say, it is possible, but in order to do it, we would either have to go through and significantly alter the residential medium density zone in that specific area to allow a bunch more uses that aren't historically allowed in the residential medium density zone, and a much greater height allowance than what's allowed there. So personally, and in the sake of like transparency and public process, if planning commission wanted to go that route, I would strongly advocate that we would be doing a comp plan zone change on those properties so that they would be zone mixed use, because that's the honest thing to do. Whereas just making text amendments in order to do a zone change without doing a zone change, that just seems dirty, frankly. So that being said, the other option that I think is kind of the option two, if there is concern there, and I think there could be at the public level, and comp plan zone change process, if we have to go through that, that's public processes. So we could have lots of people showing up going, what are you doing to where I'm living? Which might be the right thing to do in the long term. But I don't know that it's as much the right thing to do in the short term. And generally, historically at City of Keizer level, we've kind of wanted property owners to drive those types of applications. So the other option would be, okay, we do Lock Haven Center and the mixed-use properties within the Lock Haven Center, and we designate the Shamawa Center,
Yeah.
and that gets us to the target we would need to hit as well. So, so really, for tonight, like I said, I kind of was hoping to hear back from Planning Commission on what your thoughts are. We've got the Council of Governments, they're helping us with this work, and we've got kind of some, we shared, it's in this packet too, from what we brought last week, or last 2 months ago. Ultimately, we want to be able to move forward with kind of settling into, okay, how are we going to amend our code so that I can notice that to DLCD and we can have some public hearings in the next few months to actually make the changes to get the CFAs designated and the code adjusted to implement that. So that's kind of what I'm looking for tonight, is basically some input from Planning Commission and consensus on, do we want to push forward with just the Lock Haven Center? Do we want to look at the Lock Haven and Shamawa Center kind of jointly? Do we want to reconsider the Cherry Center? I mean, those are all, really the options are up to you all. And so with that, I'd be happy to try to answer any additional questions that you have on that.
Commissioner Witters, go for it.
I have a few thoughts, I don't know necessarily questions, but it seems to me that with the exception of the Lock Haven Center, just about everywhere else is pretty much built up. So in order to fulfill the requirements of the climate-friendly area, there has to be the economic impetus for somebody to go in and acquire some property, probably raise some structures, and then start over. So Lock Haven obviously has those acreage areas which are set up, and I believe those are the mixed-use zone, right?
Yeah.
So, so that makes sense. I think I said this last meeting, it makes sense to kind of focus in that area. I am worried though, about if we were to adjust the RM, as you state, as was in the packet, because that manufactured park does worry me a little bit, because whether it's designated that way or not, it is, like you said, it is basically affordable housing. And I know that manufactured parks generally are, people aren't usually losing money by owning them. But at the same time, if you're gonna redevelop something, I mean, you basically got a large acreage that is primed and ready for development as it is. So I'm not totally excited about trying to shoehorn it all into one area. I do like the idea of going with the Shamawa and the Lock Haven. I think those kind of, it allows for us to meet the criteria, but it also, the other kind of worry I had was if we did try and get it all into one area, you're gonna have one area that is extremely high density, you know, it's gonna affect traffic and all kinds of other things. So if we were to kind of be able to spread it amongst a couple areas, then you don't need to be, you know, even though we have the requirements, you don't need necessarily to try and fit everything into that one central area. So I think it, in my opinion, based on a few of those things, I mean, I see the benefit of not trying to put it in one area, maybe sharing it amongst the two, and then we don't have to, like you said, try and go through the comp plan change or the zone change or whatever. So that's just kind of my initial thoughts on it from reading it and then also listening to what you said, so.
And for the record, I'll just state, and I know there's no issue right now, but actually Commissioner Witters and I work in the same building, and we actually had a conversation very similar to this, and so there was no talk of any action being taken, but we did have a conversation, so I just want to make it clear for the record. Commissioner Lopez.
Well, this is no fun, right? Well, I mean, that's what I was thinking too. I mean, with choosing to, I think no matter what we do, there's gonna be displacement somewhere. The potential is gonna be somewhere. Somebody's gonna be affected, unfortunately, or, you know, I think it's just where can we make the less impact? And I think maybe naively, I'm thinking if we do Lock Haven and Chamawa, well, the nice thing is, I mean, they're a couple blocks away, so whatever we do can still feel like it's the same thing, you know, it's like the same, you're not like leaving downtown to go to another downtown, it kind of flows, which should be nice. And if there is gonna be displacement, like I said, just speaking naively, I mean, I'm not sure, I'm hoping that maybe slows down the potential for the displacement because we have two larger areas, and then eventually it'll creep up, but hopefully it will give, you know, those families more time to, you know, to, sounds horrible, but, you know, to find something similar to where they're at, or, because, yeah, I mean, it needs to happen, it's unfortunately, something needs to happen, so no matter what we do, what we decide, or, I mean, I'm just thinking, like I said, maybe by picking those two areas, because it'll be close by, it'll be nice for everybody to enjoy, to be able to walk, I mean, literally, you could walk from one downtown to another, you know, so that'd be nice. And like I said, and then thinking of it this way, hopefully with more available land, those areas will be not taken right away, hopefully, you know? So that's where I'm at. I think it's you're picking from what you have to, right? So.
That's a great point.
And yeah, that's, yeah. I grew up in, you know, parks, and I grew up in, you know, these low-income homes and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's one of those things where it just sucks. But just to bring him back, you know, just I can't think of having, just moving people away from their homes, you know, that's just not.
And one thing I would just say, like to speak to that is, you know, remember so the state rules that are requiring us to designate, to initially study and then designate CFAs and then make code amendments to align with the design standards for the CFAs, you know, it's a little bit in a vacuum, right? I mean, the methodology by which we studied it and the way that you had to derive the capacity, it's a prescriptive method of here's how much land you have and here's how many floors you're putting, and, you know, it's math. It doesn't necessarily mean built environment exactly how it's going to all flow out. And I do just want to kind of remind, you know, for the commission and also anybody listening is that, you know, with the revitalization plan that we did several years back in 2018, there was a bit of a market study. I wouldn't say it was a full-blown market study, but they did do an element of that was a market study for properties along River Road, in that when we looked at the revitalization plan, we said, okay, if we imagine in the next 20 years, as redevelopment happens along River Road and we start to see some more mixed-use products where maybe you have some ground floor commercial and some apartments or condos above, and we see some densification and urbanization of the commercial core of River and Cherry, we kind of designated these 3 locations that would be the most intense of those uses. And so that's the other piece to just remember here is that with the changes we're proposing, they're not all that significant compared to what we already allow. It's a little bit more height allowance. It's a little bit more density allowance. It's a greater minimum density requirement than we require right now. But that new minimum density requirement is still below the threshold of what we allow in these areas anyhow. So, at the end of the day, development is driven by market factors. And the market study that we did essentially said that it's going to take some time for these to naturally redevelop, i.e., the property values be big enough that the improvement values are low enough that it pencils for somebody to achieve the return on investment of what it's going to cost them to build brand new buildings and scrape existing buildings. Now, Lock Haven Center is different because you've got a couple big vacant pieces and we know one is locked up and we expect that at some point they're going to be coming to y'all for a master plan approval. We'll see. But it is one of those pieces where I think it may help Planning Commission as far as you aren't necessarily making a decision that is going to immediately or necessarily impact the person who's living along River Road right now. I mean, that decision is really going to be made by that property owner and or developer that comes in and determines a development plan that pencils for them. And, the studies that we did a few years ago said, without interventions by the city or tax breaks or other incentivizing pieces, it's going to be kind of a slow go as to see these things come online naturally. And we've seen a handful, right? I mean, we have the corner property on Churchdale and River. That's a small mixed-use project that's going to go there where they scraped the old house. And so we're starting to see kind of what I would kind of term mixed-use light along River Road. But again, that is something that might help a little bit with just the angst that you're feeling on that. There's a reality to it, but it is tempered a bit by what the market actually is doing on River Road as well. So just kind of for what it's worth.
Very quiet.
Sorry.
No, I think that's a good point. I mean, I'll say, yes, I did talk to Commissioner Witters about this, and I fully agree. I think there's wisdom in looking at both areas. I'm a little disappointed that the people weren't more creative. I mean, we've got 24 acres up in Keizer Station that the city owns, and I recognize that it's currently slated for industrial. But Shane, I think it was 3 years ago they came in and there was some contractor that wanted to talk to us about whatever project they wanted to do, and because of the leachate and all these other issues, it never went anywhere because of the watershed. And I mean, it's been a hot minute since we talked to those guys, but that's 24 acres of currently undeveloped property that is bare and ready potentially to go. And I think that it's frustrating that that's not being considered, because that is, in my opinion, the area where you could say, if you want some mixed-use opportunity, that's 24 acres currently sitting doing nothing, right? So I'm a little frustrated by that. There's a value statement that comes, and I agree with you to a point in terms of the market's going to bear, but it's not necessarily the local market that's driving it. It's out-of-state influences are coming in. They're seeing opportunities to build, 2-3 acre properties, and that does pencil when you get to take it 5-6 stories tall. And I know that affords people opportunity to live in the city, but it also puts a significant strain on all of the resources. We just don't have the money flowing in. I mean, there's so many big picture items that exist in this space right now that aren't being talked about. ODOT is in crisis right now as it relates to their ability to fund projects because of House Bill 2017, right? And if you're not familiar with that, it was money that came in to fund local projects that through what they call the Connect Oregon process, where they said, oh, just kidding, we're gonna dump it into like 5 or 6 pet projects. Staff kind of went like this, and now they're all of a sudden needing to come back and do their jobs. There's no money for it, there's no opportunity, and the more you kick people out of cars, the less gas tax you get, which in turn doesn't pay for the roads. And so you do still need roads for buses and all these other things and bicycles and so on and so forth. So I think the unintended consequences of a bunch of external influences are starting to make things a little bit challenging. And I think that part of the conversation that we have to have as a planning commission is where our values sit, right? And I think that the dialogue around considering keeping that particular tract of area with the mobile homes, and I think, Shane, would Lock Haven have extended west to the other trailer park that's down just across from McNary by Keizer School?
No, the center doesn't, because it really just includes the portion.
Just the one node.
Of Inland Shores a little
Okay.
bit there.
Okay.
So, and actually, no, we excluded Inland Shores because it was already developed. So when we, it's hard, the revitalization plan was not driven by the CFAC rules. It was driven by just a community-based project to go, how can we revitalize and have improvements to River Road and provide more opportunities? So actually, when we drew those boundaries, we didn't include it because it was already developed with a lot of the medical offices, the urgent care, all of those there. So the potential in that area was very minimal. So we didn't capture that. So it really is just that corner piece. You can see on, it's small, but on page 37, that top map, that dark blue line is the Lock Haven Center boundary.
And I'm looking at the map, and everything's just to the west of River Road. That's too steep, and you have Claggett Creek there, and it's probably in an area that's undevelopable. The topography would prohibit.
Yeah,
most
when you get
development.
down, that's kind of, we drew the line on basically on the hillside there.
Okay.
Because it isn't, you're not going to be able to develop, and there's a bunch of wetland down there.
I mean, I feel, from a value standpoint, I feel really good about continuing to leave Cherry out of it. I think that's such an area, it's one of those, I think that when you lose your home because of the choice that the owner makes, it's not a good feeling. It's happened to me twice in my life. And when you're a kid, it's devastating, especially when you face potentially having to leave a school and all your friends, right? Thankfully, my mom figured it out, and I'm very thankful for that. But I am unwilling to put any vote forward that supposes what we as a body think a property owner should do with their property. I just don't like that. That's why when we looked at the residential or the RTs or the urban transition zone a number of years ago, we, as a planning commission at the time, said, no, we want the property owners to be invited to come have a conversation. And we made the right decision at the end of that. We didn't initiate the legislative amendment, but we tweaked the code a little bit to create some outright permitted uses, not all under conditional uses. That's the way we do business. And I'm not okay with just making a value statement. Well, this is what the state thinks we ought to do, so we're just gonna say, here, go ahead and do this. Now, if the property owner comes in and says, hey, I wanna change the zoning on this, then they have to deal with that, right? Mm-hmm. But I completely agree with what Commissioner Witter says, and I think what Commissioner Lopez says. I think it's the best way to approach this and do make-believe math, because this is not real math. And I just hope that the state sees the wisdom in their choices here and decides to put the money behind it to actually support the communities this is going to be impacting, because I think it's going to be, the potential exists to be very harmful to communities, especially on the infrastructure side, right? I mean, sorry, rant over, but it's good work, and I was not super kind to the COG people, and I did apologize, and I hope they know that I wasn't shooting the messenger. They're just the deliverers of really, really bad law, in my opinion, but it could have been better. I think if they would have worked through it and they had a community conversations, it could have been a heck of a lot better and a lot more user-friendly, because you know what? I think we did, I know we did it right. I think Councilor Duran would say we did it right when we did the River Cherry Overlay District back in 2018. We had a lot of really good conversations about that.
I think so.
So, off the soapbox, who else has got stuff? Commissioner Hostler, I know you've been burnt, you got no more ink, you ran it all out. What do you got?
I'm writing notes.
You got anything you want to add on this? I know you've been thinking about it.
Well,
You watched the previous meeting. In fact, you told me
my planning mind says I'm trying to catch up. He was talking about homes, people. I'm hearing residential or business central business districts. Okay, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to have what you said is commercial mixed with apartments.
Yeah, the climate-friendly areas, they basically, it's really a push towards, less cars, more ability to live, work, recreate, all without the need for a car. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, that's kind of like the goal of climate-friendly areas. Also kind of like classic downtown areas or urban environments. So what we did, over the last, it's been an ongoing process when we studied and like I was raised by a woman who I think I've told you this, some of you this before, like my mom's nickname is Pollyanna because she's always Pollyanna positive, right? She always is playing the glad game. She's always like sees the silver lining. So I was raised by her, and my wife says I'm a pessimist. I say I'm a realist. But being raised by an optimist, like I will say that I was very encouraged when we went through the process of studying for CFAs because the work we had already done with a very large community engagement effort to create the revitalization plan to say, hey, here's where we see us going or the possibility of us going or creating the framework to allow us to go this direction was more in alignment than not in alignment with the climate-friendly area rules that were developed through the CFEC process. And so those were like, frankly, and I was very concerned going into it that we were going to be considering at this commission the concept of plopping down a giant climate-friendly area and basically saying, oh, that's a huge residential neighborhood that happens to be somewhat close to River Road. You're rezoned. And now it's all going away and like people would not be happy. I mean, already I am 100% blamed for the multifamily that goes up in our town. Like I apparently want all of it. Shane is the one that's driving all of this because my title has planning in it. But so there is the silver lining piece here where we have to designate the climate-friendly areas. It needs to be referenced in our comprehensive plan. It needs to be shown in our development code, and we need implementing ordinances that say it's a climate-friendly area. Now, the reality is we already have 3 climate-friendly areas. They're called the Lock Haven Center, the Cherry Center, and the Shamawa Center. Like almost, minus a height. We allow 50 feet. We're gonna have to push that up 10 whole feet to allow it. Now, in my 27 years of working here, I've yet to see a 50-foot tall building built in Keizer. Construction methods, the taller, when you get above being wood frame construction, you move into concrete and steel, the expense goes up a lot. Right. Different requirements for elevators and all kinds of different things start coming into play. And so what we really, at the end of the day, are looking at is some code amendments that are going to result from this in these specified areas that what we're proposing to do is attach it directly to the mixed-use zones, not rezone anything, right, but basically allow a building height to move up to 10 feet and a minimum density to be 20, which right now it's more like 12, I want to say. I think it's 20, Dina, is that right? 12 is the minimum?
When you say 20, you're talking about 20 dwellings.
20 dwelling units per acre. Yeah. And that would be a minimum. So there is an increase in the minimum. Now, just to put a frame of reference, and I think I kind of maybe pointed this out at the last one, we looked at a few of the actual developments that have happened. So the new apartments on River Road, I think they capped in around 24 or 26 units an acre. The max in that area is like 28 right now is what we have. I rarely have multifamily developers come in and not hit our minimum density target.
So we said 40 per acre. That's never going to develop, right?
Well, so
I think
I have to be
55
careful. I have
units
to, I have
per
to be,
acre.
I have to be a little bit careful. So the reality is that the statute that we're dealing with says we have to make some changes. And I guess what I'm trying to express is that, yes, we'll see
The
changes.
administrative rule, let's be clear, it's not a statute.
True.
It was an executive order turned into rules.
Yes, you're right, you're right. So the OARs mandate that we change certain things in our code to allow for certain things. And so that really is what we have, when we don't have a choice, this is what we have to do. The good news from my perspective, where when I hear concerns from Planning Commission or citizens, is that the good news is that we are already pretty close to being in alignment. We do need to make some changes, but these are not like sweeping changes of taking residential single family and turning it into dense mixed use development and displacing entire neighborhoods.
Right.
This is a more, I will say, surgical change. Now, what's hard about that is that the state's also going to have to bless these final versions. And so we're going to hope that everything is still in alignment, because what some would say is that, well, we're not doing enough, because realistically, we're not going to see as much redevelopment happen as should be happening. But we're adhering to the rules and how we're studying it and how we're trying to apply the standard. So, I mean, I would just say that, I mean, for all the soapboxing that we might do on how we got to where we are, if we should be at where we are, I mean, at the end of the day, we're where we are. And I think the good news for us, or for some it may be bad news because they want to see us do more, but the good news for those that are concerned about displacement or lots of sweeping changes, we're not really talking about huge changes. And, you know, that Shamawa Center, while from a mapping perspective and a mathematics perspective, there's capacity, there's also some really expensive real estate that's already developed there. So I don't know. I mean, it would give opportunity for greater density. And again, like we didn't even really get into the whole discussion point where, remember, like also coupled with this are things like, we're not going to be mandating parking soon. We're not going to mandate parking in CFAs because we can't. Now, the market historically has driven that you need places to park if you're going to rent out places for people to live. Right? So, but it does create more flexibility for developers to pursue different building products that we haven't seen as much of. So, for what it's worth.
I still think the one thing I get hung up on is that number, that fake math number that exists. And is that a carrot or does it become a stick? And that's the question that I asked last month. And my concern is that we recognize that as a city, there is the need to look at employment lands. That's a conversation that's gone on as long as I've been on the Planning Commission. I know Councilor Duran and I talked about it a lot when he was on the Planning Commission. But that requires this fun thing called an urban growth expansion, and the unintended consequences, if we aren't meeting this because of X, Y, and Z, then does that become the stick the state swings at us because we're not doing it? Now, I see you kind of balk at it a little bit, but it's a real thing, I think, in my opinion. Because they're saying we're not doing enough to meet the 20-year land supply, and we're not doing this, we're not providing this, they're not, you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, you're right. You're getting into some like a lot bigger conceptual kind of ideas, and you know there is that. I mean, actually, we're going to be having a work session with council about urban growth boundary stuff on Monday. I found out about when I got back from vacation. I was like, oh, we're doing this, okay. So there is this other element where, because we're in a shared urban growth boundary, there is some flexibility afforded to us that we wouldn't have otherwise. Of course, that also comes with other issues, as you're alluding to. So like it is super complex. I think at the end of the day, from a code administration point of view, instead of holding somebody to a 12 or 14 unit minimum for multifamily, we're going to be looking for 20 dwelling unit minimums. So it's bigger, it's more, but I can tell you from the projects I've approved recently, they all were over 20, and they
When they
were
came in that way, yeah.
They that's what they wanted to build.
Yeah.
And so like, I don't know that it's gonna have this massive impact, at least not immediately. It clearly gives the opportunity for more than what we've had. And that's, that's the part that I agree with you. Like, it's like, okay, how does this work? But hey, because it's in a CFA, we don't have to do traffic studies and things like that. Yeah, all right.
Which makes it very good for ambulances and fire apparatus and stuff to get there. Commissioner Witters.
I just wanted to comment on what you were just mentioning about the carrot or the stick, and maybe it's a little naive, whatever, The word
Naive.
didn't come out. Thank you.
Yeah.
On my part, but it seems to me that I'm not sure how the stick part can happen, meaning if we make the changes, adjust the climate, or implement the climate-friendly area as required, the city has done their part. Again, it goes to economic factors. If it doesn't pencil out for a developer to develop to that, they're not gonna do it. So,
Right.
I don't know how Keizer, as a city or what have you, can be held accountable for the fact that, economically, it just doesn't work out for a developer to develop to that standard.
Well, I think the real example of that is it used to be acreage residential in Keizer when it was Marion County. And then you had at some point 20,000 square foot lots, and then 10,000 and 5,000, now we're at 4,000 minimums. And I think that what ends up happening is the state, through the Department of Land Conservation and Development, creates creates allowances so we can shrink our minimum lot sizes. And so my concern is that if we're not meeting those numbers as a city, that they're holding the city's future at bay, because they're saying, well, you only did 200 units out of your 5,297 million that you're supposed to do. Not really that many, it's only 5,000, but still. And so because you're not doing enough, you need to go back and redo all of the CFAs and redo all of this stuff. You're absolutely right, it is a market-based thing, but so were minimum lot sizes, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And so I watch the history and I think about how these have all sort of come down the pipeline, and I think Shane and all the work that was done on the River Cherry Overlay District and these minimal changes are probably gonna have very minimal actual impacts. It's the what next that always concerns me a little bit. So you're absolutely right. But I think looking at land use from a historical perspective, you go, what's next, right? Just my opinion, but that's a good point. Thank you for bringing it up. Commissioner Hostler.
I have one question for Shane. Earlier you said, and I wanted to bring it up, is CFAs and mandatory parking, oil, water.
I mean, yeah, the reality is that with this CFAC legislation, the OARs that came into play, the new rules that we're under, because the size of our city, that we're in a metro area, within the CFAs, you can't require parking, but even beyond that, and it's been a while, it's been like last year, I think, we did a presentation on the parking reform. Now I requested an extension to parking reform for us, which I got us, and then I got an email today that was reminding me of a deadline that we had, and I was like, wait a minute, I got an extension to that. Don't I have another 6 months? So there's a little, I might be a little bit in trouble with the state right now, but realistically, for our community, sooner than later, we're going to be coming to talk about additional design standards, parking so I was on a conference call today, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but I was on a conference call today with a bunch of different cities throughout the state, because there's some additional, there's some stuff coming out of the governor's office regarding middle housing and middle housing land divisions, and some fixes that may be proposed that some of us question, what are we trying to fix? But very interesting, most cities that are similar to us or are in metro areas have already gotten rid of parking requirements for minimums. Salem did it, Springfield did it, Eugene did it, Beaverton did it, Oregon City did it. Albany, like a bunch of different cities have already done it, because like technically the deadline was.
Last year.
Okay, yeah, I got an extension through the end of this year, but I thought I'd got another extension, and they said, no, you didn't. And I was like,
Was
wait,
it
what?
January 23, if I remember correctly?
Originally it was,
Yeah.
and there was a piece that went into effect that I couldn't extend, which was the within a half mile of transit
buses,
service, or frequent transit service. But now we're at the stage where it's like, if you keep any parking mandates, there's like basically two paths. You either get rid of parking mandates altogether, or if you keep them, you've got to price a certain amount of parking, you've got to have a certain amount of EV parking. There was all those things that I shared with Planning Commission. We all went, it's impossible for us to do. We're going to have to get rid of parking standards, but we're going to push that out for a little bit. And so we did that. Well, now it's kind of coming to a head, because ultimately this CFA stuff has to be all done by June. And so, we've got 8 months or whatever it is, 9 months before everything has to be fully adopted and implemented. But we're kind of at the end, which I thought our parking was coinciding with that. And so there was some miscommunication with me in the state. So I may have not had an argument. It wasn't an argument. I had a nice conversation today. So we'll see what happens with that. We may be dialing up a text amendment pretty quick around the first of the year so that we're not out of compliance. But I'm hopeful that I can get it to align with all the work that we're having to do with CFAs anyway, so we can have a good community conversation about it. But yeah, Frank, the reality is that, again, it's not saying parking can't be provided. It's saying that local governments are not allowed to mandate a certain amount of minimum parking. Yeah, that's all I can say about that.
All right. Commissioner Lopez.
Just for me to understand, so in that case, I mean, it would just become supply and demand. You build whatever you want, and if it doesn't sell, then it doesn't rent out, or it doesn't do
Yeah.
whatever.
That's the argument, and that's like honestly the state. That's what they've said kind of from day one with the parking reform, and they have a lot of different examples from around the nation where places have done this, and yeah, there's a lot of concern from a lot of folks on it, but it is, like I said, whether or not it's advertised strongly, we have approved a lot of land use decisions over the last couple of years that technically had no requirement for minimum parking. We have yet to see anybody build something with no parking spaces. They're just not, the market's not going to support it
Yet.
at this point in time. Yeah.
That's all been said.
It's all been said, at least twice.
I will say, I'd like to add that the Lock Haven and the Chemawa Center areas that we discussed earlier, I do agree with everybody else that leaving Cherry off is probably a good idea. It's an area that I think will organically grow itself in a way that we need it to. In these other two areas, I think having that change is helpful for them to just, here, you have these options, you don't actually have to do it. We're not, requiring landowners to build mixed use at the drop of the change, but it does help facilitate that a little bit more.
Yeah. All right, so are we going on a consensus on this one? Because I know we're not actually.
Yeah, we're not making a decision because we need to draft actual language to bring to you guys. I think from the conversation tonight, I'm hearing that yes, we still want to not be looking at Cherry, but that the preference would be as opposed to focusing in on just Lock Haven, which I thought was a great idea that was brought up at the August meeting. And honestly, I had some hopes that, hey, maybe that makes a ton of sense and we can make this work. And then when we started crunching the numbers, and Sapinar from the COG reminded me, well, the problem is that it doesn't really work that way because it's just this totally prescriptive method of how we derive the number. So we just can't get there. Like it doesn't happen unless we bring in all these other properties. So what I'm hearing is that, yeah, let's move forward with looking at Lock Haven and Chemawa as our CFAs, and kind of we will come back with appropriate language to make that happen.
If that industrial land can just be looked at even with a wink, that would be super.
I mean,
I don't know. I don't think so.
part of it is.
Okay, all right.
So, and I will say this, Commissioner Lawyer, when we did the studying, we did talk a little bit about Keizer Station in general and those different areas. And ultimately, it didn't make as much sense for the provisions that were
Transit
around.
station's literally right there.
That part, that makes some sense. Yes. No, I mean, there's some reality there for sure.
But the RCOD already had most of the
The
elements.
RCOD already had most of the standards, and it also has, primarily, the Lock Haven Center has a couple of big pieces of property
And no master plan.
and a master planning process.
Right.
So like that was, I mean, because you have Area C, which is all mixed use.
Right.
The problem with that is that, I mean, there's a reason it hasn't developed for a long time. It's so parcelized and not assembled in any way, shape, or form. So that's part of the issue.
If only there was a way to bring lots together, that'd be strange.
Yeah.
Counselor Duran.
Well, I was looking at this and just thinking, I do think that the two, the Lock Haven and Shamawa, make the most sense for us. But looking at the structures in the Cherry overlay zone, there's a lot of structures in there that are gonna need to be replaced or severe upgrades in the next 20 years. So
Right.
that might organically be the the easiest place for development, just because of the structures. Just looking, going down River Road, there's a lot that need to be done. So, you know, I'm hoping that my property doesn't need that. I'm doing everything I can to keep it the way I like it, but, there's potential for a
Well, but
lot of
it's
this.
your property. You're able to do what you choose to do with it.
Well, not if I want to do a 5-story
Are
structure.
you Cherry or River?
River.
Ah.
But I hope that doesn't
Or
happen
small, I
there.
guess. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking that organically, it may be easier to use Cherry River overlay because it may naturally be, people
But
want to develop it.
But I think it still has all of the elements of the River Cherry Overlay District. It just wouldn't add the additional CFA
CFA
layers over
component,
top of
yeah.
it.
One thing I would add, just, again, you know, we're gonna have public meetings and public hearings on proposed changes to our development code ultimately to implement these changes.
Okay.
Now, there's a certain piece we have to do in designating of climate-friendly areas and then changing certain code requirements to meet those threshold standards, right? There is nothing that would say we couldn't choose to change some other standards for consistency's sake if
In
we
our
felt like it made
arbitrarily.
sense, even if you didn't designate it officially. So that is something that, like, just FYI,
Or it could be a
that,
variance.
that already has been in the back of Shane and Dina's mind, especially because we are the administrators of the development code.
Yeah.
And the way our code is structured currently is that the centers have its own set of standards and everywhere else doesn't because it's an overlay district. So right now with the CFAs, I'm basically creating an overlay on top of an overlay on top of an overlay. And I don't love that from a code administration perspective, but I think those are some things that when we get to that public hearing time and we hear from community and property owners, hopefully, on proposed changes, that may be able to give Planning Commission some guidance on, hey, what does make sense overall? Because maybe it is making sense to say, oh, you know what? Let's increase that height restriction across the board. Like, give people the opportunity to do what they want. Like, I mean, the difference is when we designated, it puts us into a place of having to report and having to jump through certain hoops that we don't necessarily want to do citywide.
Right.
So, anyway, for just what it's worth.
Yeah, I mean, at any rate, even if it is Cherry and they say, hey, we really like this thing that exists in the CFA, they could
Sure.
theoretically come in for a variance.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Is that helpful for your thought process on that?
No, I knew that makes sense. I'm just thinking organically.
Yeah,
It may
it's
happen
probably-
opposite of what we're
That's
gonna,
right, that's
what we're
right.
gonna project.
That's right, yeah.
There's also some new stuff coming in where we have to like allow adjustments and some things like that that is going to be getting implemented in the next couple of years too. So, yeah.
Super exciting. And I think it's important, again, Shane, thank you for couching this in sort of the ground a little bit. I mean, it does feel scary when we're talking about these big changes, but they're not massive sweeping changes, the 12 to the 20 units and stuff. And it was good work, and I think that I will always be proud of the work that was done on the River Cherry Overlay District in the past. And I think that the dialogue here, hearing from all of the commissioners was really helpful. Do we feel comfortable about asking Shane and Dina to go forward with visiting this and coming up with proposed text amendment changes for this item?
Yes.
Okay, there you go.
Awesome.
Great work, Dina. Thanks for presenting it, Shane.
You're welcome.
All right, moving forward, Counselor Duran, razzle dazzle, 2 times.
Okay. Well, now I gotta go back to the,
I think my favorite comment last night at the Parks meeting, by the way, was we do reports on the parks that we all are in charge of and keep an eye on. And Bob Newton Park's one of the parks. And so Bob Shackelford has Bob Newton. And so I said, can you tell us about Newton Park? And it took him about a half beat and he caught it. And I was quite proud of that really bad joke. Counselor Duran.
okay, what the council has been doing, we did allow the parade to happen, so we voted, so just so you guys know, we are gonna have the parade and I wish I had the date. I don't have that up here.
December.
It's in December, but I don't remember what date it is. Yeah. So that's gonna happen. We did, do the resolution to support the placement of the Gold Star Memorial, so that's something Chair Laurier's been working on. And, a few other things that, another one that I know Chair Laurier's worked on is we, allowed the support, letter to go out for a petition to amend the 3-basin rule for the North Santiam, so for the sewer system, but other than that, it was, typical stuff, so we're not doing anything super exciting yet.
Always doing exciting stuff.
Next Monday, we might be a little bit of fireworks.
And I'll give just a little bit of a, the Gold Star Family Monument, for those that aren't aware, PFC Ryan J. Hill Park is over in Keizer Station, between Panera Bread and Keizer Permanente. It's named after the only Keizer resident to lose his life in active duty combat since Keizer became a city, excuse me. And Shauna Fennison's, his mom, came forward and wanted to do a Gold Star memorial monument in that park. And so, for those that are unfamiliar, Gold Star families are families who lost service members in active duty service. And it's something that I think is super important. There's not one in Oregon yet. And so that got approved by council. I'm very thankful for that. And we have the opportunity now to move forward with getting the fundraising and stuff done. And so that's live. I actually put the flyers out today on that. And so, if you want to stalk me on Facebook, I did. It's one of the very few things that I put out there to the world for anybody to see. Go ahead and check it out, get it out there, talk about it. We do have a very tentative goal to try to get this thing built and open by September 25th next year, which is the Gold Star Memorial Family, or Gold Star Family Day in 2025. So super cool there. And then just a little context on the 3-basin rule, since Councilor Duran brought that up. Effectively what that is it allows for the state to allow for wastewater treatment facilities to be in compliance with a recent Supreme Court decision, what they call the Maui decision, which talked about direct discharge or functionally equivalent direct discharge of wastewater into bodies of water. And so there's some work being done on that to really actually benefit systems to make sure that things are being treated very, very, very well and much better than they have been in the history. Because if you've seen some of the septic systems up in the North Santiam Canyon that existed before, they were very scary. I know Councilor Duran's probably ripped a few out. All right. Gosh, what a good meeting. Thank you guys for being here. Frank, I'm glad to have you back.
Well,
I missed you.
I do have one thing I'd like to add.
Go for it.
I'd like to echo what you said, Commissioner Lar. my tribe has what they call the West Valley Memorial. It's in Grand Ronde. And it's for veterans. And each branch, except the Merchant Marines, has their own pillar of granite. And we get nominations, put it forward to the Veterans Committee. It's been a while since we put some names on, so if you know anybody or out in the Keizer world knows somebody, I think they can get a hold of me through the frankhostler@hotmail.com, and we could move the names forward.
I love that you still have a Hotmail account.
I've had that thing since I was like able to drive.
Commissioner Lopez as well as an AOL. That's awesome. You've got mail. All right, council, what are we doing? So city council, Monday is a work session, so it's not a regular council meeting. The following council meeting is in 2 weeks. Tell you what, I will be happy to do it. And if you want to come and refresh your mind on how to do a council update, you're welcome to. And then Commissioner King, if you want to come and see what that looks like, you're welcome. It's usually pretty informal. Just give the council kind of a high-level update of what happened here. And I'd love the opportunity to introduce you to the council. And that is on October 21st. So if you have no obligation to go, but if you want to come and give it a go, meet the council, get introduced, and then kind of see how to do it at the most basic elementary level, you're welcome to. And then we'll proceed. It looks like November we're still on, Shane.
Yeah, my hope is that we might be able to bring those rules back to you guys for that November meeting.
Perfect.
I'm gonna have to confirm that with the legal department, but yeah. So that'd be the plan. We don't have a text amendment we're already outside the 45-day notice window for that, so that would be what we would
Well,
be
I
doing.
guess then, should we formally ask the planning commission to allow the chair to cancel the meeting if
you
staff
choose
does
to.
not have appropriate rules to bring back for consideration in November?
Maybe. That might be
So
a
then
good
we'd have to
idea.
suspend the rules to consider an item not already on the agenda, if we want to go full Robert's rules on this, right? Or can we do it by consensus? Don?
I don't know.
I'm not trying to be ridiculous, I want to follow the rules.
Joe, dang it.
Well, I haven't read your ordinance in like a year, but the other committees, we don't need a motion to cancel meetings, just a
Okay,
consensus.
so planning commission by consensus, if staff is not able to come back with the proposed rule changes in November, will you authorize the chair to cancel the meeting in consultation with the planning director?
Yes.
Yes.
Great, that sounds wonderful, thank you. See, we're making things happening. I think we should do that through the rest of 2024, just saying. All right, is there any other witty statements, thoughts, remarks, comments? Hearing none, we stand adjourned at 7:50. That was a fun.